Well, I think one of the questions that many of us, perhaps if not all of us, have with this pandemic that we're facing in this country, in Maryland, in our state, and in the world is, where is God in all this? What is God up to? What is God doing? Well, the Gospel of John, one of the main themes in the Gospel of John is, if you want to know what God is like, if you want to know what God is doing, if you want to know who God is and who God is all about, look to Jesus. Look to Jesus. And in our story in the Gospel of John today, we have Jesus staring squarely into the face of illness, of sickness, and death. So let's take a look at this story and see what it tells us about Jesus, and then see what it tells us about God. Well, the first thing we can notice is that Jesus has a rescue plan. Now, it's not a rescue plan that Mary and Martha know anything about or even understand or know. And yet, Jesus is on his way. Jesus is coming for rescue in the face of illness and death. And that doesn't make the illness any easier. It doesn't make the death any easier. Illness and death are awful, and they were for Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. And so when Jesus comes and they say, "Where were you? Couldn't you have kept my brother alive?" He doesn't say, "What's the matter with you? I'm Jesus. I've got this under control." No. He mourns with them. He comforts them. He stands in solidarity with them. He knows this is awful. He knows this is tough. And neither Jesus nor the Christian faith authentically preached has ever said that there will not be illness, there will not be pain, there will not be suffering in this world. But what it does say is that God is on a rescue mission. What it does say is that Jesus stands with us. And it's so powerful in this story when you think about it. I mean, Jesus cried. Jesus, the Son of God, the Lord of the universe, God in the flesh, cried right there in solidarity with Mary and Martha. So it tells us Jesus is on a rescue mission, but Jesus still stands with those who suffer and with those who mourn. But he doesn't leave it there. And thank God he doesn't leave it there in the suffering and the mourning and pain. What Jesus does is he lifts up hope. He says to Martha, "There is hope. I am the resurrection and the life. Even though your brother has died, this is not the end of the story. Even though he died, he will live. I am the resurrection." There is hope. And then he goes out to that tomb where it seems like there is no hope, and he calls Lazarus out of that grave. And in that moment, he gives those people and he gives the world a window into the future that God is planning. The first window is into the future that comes just a couple weeks later when Jesus himself emerges from the tomb, resurrected, that stone put aside, that Jesus will defeat death and be resurrected and live forever. But the window, the glimpse into the future doesn't stop there, because that resurrection points to that general resurrection that Martha was talking about when Martha said, "Lord, I know he will rise again on the last day." It's that resurrection from Jesus from the tomb that points to that future that says, yes, there will be more resurrection. There will be a resurrection for everyone on a new heaven and a new earth, where heaven and earth comes together, and there's no more illness. There's no more pain. There's no more suffering, and there's no more death. So Jesus, in this story, is on a rescue mission. It's not a rescue mission that Mary or Martha or anyone else understands, and it's certainly not on their timetable. Jesus stands with Mary and Martha and mourns with them. Jesus gives them hope, and then Jesus, in raising Lazarus from the dead, points to that future and opens a window to that future where there is resurrection, where there is life. So what does this tell us about where God is now as we face this pandemic? First, it tells us that God is indeed on a rescue mission. Now, it's not a rescue mission that we're going to understand. It's certainly not on our timetable, but know this, God is on a rescue mission. Second, it tells us that God is standing in solidarity with all those who suffer, all those who are sick, all those who are mourning the dead, all those who are working so hard to care for those who are suffering and sick. God is standing in solidarity with that nurse with tears in their eyes at the end of that shift. God is always with us. God is always with you. God is with everyone who is suffering right now and loves them so much. I guarantee it. And thank God that God is not going to leave us in that suffering. God calls to us, God calls to you to look with hope. To look with hope at Jesus and the resurrection he promises. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And that window, that future that was displayed with the raising of Lazarus and the resurrection of Jesus in the first century, that's still real for you. That's still real for us. And that's still real for this world. Pandemic or not, the end of this world, most assuredly, is resurrection on a new heaven and a new earth for all of us, where there is no pain, where there is no illness, where there is no death. Ultimately, at some point, that is our future. And that's what comes in the other readings too. Paul says to us, he who raised Christ from the dead, he's going to raise you too. In that reading from Ezekiel, he's in the wilderness, he's in the desert. Now what does that desert represent? That desert represents Jerusalem burned to the ground by the Babylonians. All hope is lost. The people are scattered. They're exiled. And yet God presents a vision of hope and new life to Ezekiel as those bones come together and rise up to life out of the desert. That is our future in the end. So today we remember God is on a rescue mission. We remember that God stands with us, mourns with us, loves us, and is with us no matter what. We remember that God calls us to look to him and to Jesus and to the resurrection and hope, and that we have a future that is bright even in death, that can never be taken away. May God bless you. May God keep you. Know that he loves you always and is with you always. Amen.
Amen.